This is an RNZ podcast.
It is time for Midweek Mediawatch. Midweek Mediawatch o'clock, we call it, with Mr. Midweek Mediawatch himself, Colin Peacock, who joins me now from the studio in Wellington. Hello, Colin.
Hi there.
Let's get straight into it. Lots to get through tonight. So the big story since last we spoke, obviously, is Iran.
Yeah, indeed. And I mean, when the news broke, I guess, in the weekend, a lot of people these days will be finding out, of course, from their phones with the alerts. I certainly did, and it's quite startling when you get those alerts. But I think still when something like this happens and people want to catch up with it, I think people do still go to their TVs, turn on, try and get rolling news coverage if they can get it. So at times like this, it's a shame we've never really had in New Zealand a domestic dedicated news channel, though of course if you've got Sky or whatever, you can choose from a number of them or go online and get a live feed from somewhere. The Freeview viewers can still watch Al Jazeera, and on the Freeview dongle thingy that I've got at home, there's a thing called Haystack, which has a bunch of news channels, so interesting to flip through those. But given that TVNZ isn't really set up for that these days, when the Q&A show came on last Sunday, I thought they did really well. They rejigged their program. Obviously, what they had planned would have had to have gone out the window, or at least part of it. And they did a really good summary at the top to update people. And of course, at the time that they were going on air, which was 9 o'clock in the morning, they had those unconfirmed claims from, I think, first Israel, then from Trump, that Iran's Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei had been killed. But that was not at all confirmed. But they took it all in their stride. So here's just a little bit of how they handled bringing a Sunday morning audience up to speed and adding in a few little bits of important context.
The conflict comes after days of talks between the US and Iran failed to reach a peaceful deal. For several weeks, the US has been building up its military presence in the Middle East, its largest in the region since the invasion of Iraq in 2003. But although Donald Trump has said the purpose is to stop Iran from developing a nuclear weapon, he had a clear message to Iran's people.
When we are finished, take over your government. It will be yours to take.
One of the things that makes this such an interesting story from a media perspective, Colin, is that there are so few journalists inside the main country under attack, which is Iran. I mean, we tried to find some and pretty quickly realised that it's not going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, in that way it parallels, Gaza, I guess, in that, the Israeli forces wouldn't allow a lot of journalists to get in, but there were independent journalists reporting out, and from mostly regional sort of news outlets. But it's difficult for everyone. But in part, this is down to Iran itself, right? Because they cracked down on international news organisations in recent years and news agencies that have had bureau in Tehran and possibly reporters elsewhere as well for quite some time. So a lot of those closed. There's also been this kind of media blackout and also the internet shutdowns, which I think were sporadic and hard to predict since, I think, December last year, possibly before that as well. So when you had all those disturbances and the violent and deadly protests, not a lot was able to get out. Al Jazeera has had some people there that they've been able to rely on, and of course they had reporters throughout Gaza they were able to contact when power and other sort of problems allowed it. But yeah, it's been a shame in a way. This has rebounded on Iran, like their story of their people almost can't be told. And one reporter told Reporters Sans Frontières, the media freedom group, it often got down to the point where journalists and media outlets that echoed the government's narrative were allowed to have internet access and SIM cards. Independent journalists were not, and a lot of them just left on that basis. And actually, just to illustrate the flip side of that is that then you get a lot of reporting from where the international reporters can be, so places like Dubai and particularly in Jerusalem, where of course all major news organisations have big bureaus and do a lot of their reporting for the Middle East from there. Here's just a little bit of what I'm talking about. This is kind of random, but really I tuned into the Bloomberg news channel and found they were bouncing between those two places, Dubai and Jerusalem.
Amongst Gulf states and certainly amongst the region is that this is a war like no other, and every single country has been brought into it.
Bloomberg's Dan Williams is in Jerusalem. So Dan, obviously Hezbollah now involved in a major way. It seems this could be more protracted than perhaps we were hoping for through the course of the weekend.
Indeed, and though there was an abating over the overnight of direct Iranian attacks on Israel, they appear to have resumed this morning. I'm talking to you from the bomb shelter. So it's a fast-moving situation, not just for tens of millions of people in the region. On an individual level, many people have had to move back and forth, taking shelter, emerging as the sirens sound and the missiles come in.
But I suppose, though, those Gulf states are still a crucial part of this story, both in terms of, being potentially, absorbing some damage, but also diplomatically in terms of perhaps negotiating some kind of solution.
Yeah, I mean, that's why it was good that Jack Tame in that Q&A intro mentioned those nuclear talks where, according to some accounts, there could have been an agreement reached. Donald Trump and the state side clearly didn't think so. But yeah, that's definitely part of it. And that reported there from Bloomberg that he was kind of conscious of the fact we're hearing about this because it's Israel, but there will be people in these other places also sheltering in, similar type of bunkers. So aware that he's got to kind of try and speak from the region, but the reporters just aren't there. BBC's security correspondent Frank Gardner talked a lot about this, where you have, Oman, Dubai, Qatar, places like that. And we've seen a few strikes and some deaths and injuries there, but nothing on the scale of what's going on in Iran. And when I was reading this stuff, I was thinking this feels like it's a sidebar to, obviously Iran, where the heavy bombing and the focus of it all is. But, as I read on to his piece, I could see the point he's making, because he's saying from an economic and security point of view, this is, it shows the creep, the spread of this, that other states being pulled into it, partly because of Iran's own response. But this is a really, really relevant part of the story. And where you get those countries that have better relationships with the West and the US, and where people thought they were safe and secure, diplomatic pressure will come from them too. They'll be feeding back into this. They'll want this stopped. And actually, Frank Gardner, now I think about it, when years ago when I worked in the BBC World Newsroom in the UK, he joined at that point, and he'd been working in business, didn't find it fulfilling, but he understood that he spoke Arabic and he'd worked in some of those countries. And he said there were very few journalists, there were no BBC reporters or stringers there. He went and set himself up in those places. And I wonder if, that was partly in his mind when he was drawing attention to what was going on there.
That's an interesting point.
But there's another kind of media angle, and this might seem a sidebar, but I think is also, in terms of media, it is worth considering, which is in Dubai in particular, all these influencers that they have in the region that have promoted this safe image. So there are lots of stories in the international media now and here in New Zealand pointing out that there are people who've been there, lived this pleasant life that they project online as influencers and online content creators about how nice it is to live in Dubai or UAE or some other places too, but Dubai is really the headquarters of it. And I listened to, do you know the Rest is Entertainment, the podcast?
With Marina Hyde.
Yeah, Marina Hyde and co-host Richard Osman.
Yeah, it's great.
Author and, general all-round media guy. And he said there are something like 50,000 content creators in Dubai from other countries, and you can get a kind of visa to do it, and it's all supported by the state. It's part of their sort of soft power.
Soft power, yeah.
Yeah, and this is how he described the deal that gets you there to kind of sell the dream.
If you live in any country in the world, you can apply to move to Dubai under this scheme. And under this scheme, they give you a number of different things. They give you a visa. They give you like a physical Creators HQ hub, which has, podcast studios, offices, all those things. They will give you business and legal support. They will essentially set you up. Come over here for free, and we're going to give you these offices. We're going to give you these podcast studios.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, amazing.
I wonder what they're up to now, those influencers.
Well, this is the thing. Some of them are posting nothing at all, but others are just confused and upset. And because they're sharers, they are posting it. So Marina Hyde in that podcast was talking about some of them, if you follow these influencers, are literally the same sort of motifs all the way through it. Wear a bathrobe, you balcony shot. There's even some, I think she meant this literally. There are little helicopters you can go and like sit in and take photographs in that don't go anywhere. Right. And the influencers use these as part of their theme because that's the image of Dubai. So now they're confused, and some of them are projecting this. There was a story about a French one, a woman waving her passport in the air and screeching at her followers to pressure the French government to come and get her. Yeah. So there's a fair amount of sort of schadenfreude about this. Just for example, the Herald has a story, Iran strikes send VIP Dubai influencers back to reality. And of course, this is not the focus of where it should be, what's going on, particularly in Iran, where where there are more than 800 deaths confirmed, probably a whole lot more. But it just shows, doesn't it, that complete cleavage of we've got the states that are aligned with the West, of where the money and commerce goes on, and they've been able to create this very different kind of economy to the one that's now under attack and effectively at war with the US and Israel.
If we turn to the local angle, there's been a lot of, we've heard about New Zealanders stranded in the region, but also a lot of political to and fro about New Zealand's official position, Colin.
Yeah, well, the plight of New Zealanders stranded overseas, they were leading the 6 p.m. news, people that have to drive long distances, try to get to Saudi Arabia, cross borders, and those are genuine, legitimate stories and people that will connect with New Zealanders. I haven't got a problem with that, albeit that, like we said before, obviously the main suffering and impact is in Iran and some of those other countries, Lebanon and so on itself. But Prime Minister Chris Luxon really getting a hard time for failing to make it clear what New Zealand's position is. A lot has been said about that. It's been discussed tonight on the WIP and other places. And to me, just instinctively it feels like it's a bit harsh in that this forensic analysis of his hesitant performance on Sunday, but again on Monday, when they had time to get it together, and we know that he likes to follow his lines and try and be clear, and he just wasn't able to do it. But just as an example for anyone who hasn't heard a whole lot of this, so this is One News on Monday, not long after the post-cabinet media conference in the afternoon. This is what TVNZ's political editor Mikey Sherman made of it.
The situation seemed to put Christopher Luxon under strain today, mixing up Israel with Iran.
New Zealand has long supported actions to prevent Israel from getting access to a nuclear weapon, actions to make sure that Iran doesn't repress and kill its own people.
Then claiming any action to stop nuclear weapons and terrorism is a good thing, but asked what any action meant.
We obviously understand. We're not saying that. What we're saying is that we understand this. I don't know how to be any clearer, guys. We've had a long set. Sorry?
What do you think of this, Colin? Is it fair to make a big deal out of that lack of clarity, in your opinion?
Well, I guess it is. In the end, it is. It feels harsh and it feels very selective, and that there was possibly the worst of the most stumbly moments.
It was pretty stumbly.
Yeah, but there were others. And again, he has today said, look, because he's had to do another clarification in Parliament on another matter that was rated about visas. But I think his belief is that if he just hadn't used the word any, we would support any action that does this. Because then some people felt it's far too literal when I think it was Henry Cook, the deputy political editor of the Post, followed up and said, oh, any action? What, you mean carpet bombing? And yeah, I don't think anyone really thinks he meant that. But I guess the point is that you have to be able to represent your nation's position as Prime Minister, and the Foreign Minister should too. Winston Peters isn't here. He's off on his travels. So at that point, you really do need to be able to give clarity. And I don't know, Audrey Young of the Herald wrote a harsh piece calling it his Claire Curran moment, which, again, you have to be a bit of a political junkie to remember, but yes, of course, as a much, much more junior minister, she had a complete inability to answer, which was as bad and again was moralised and picked out and replayed in news. And, her ministerial career was probably over by that point anyway because of other blunders. But yeah, I guess the upshot is a leader does have to be pretty much clearer than that on the very biggest issue of the time. But, I don't think anyone really feels that New Zealand's Prime Minister's inability to clearly lay it down a position that's not going to change the minds of many other nations is actually all that big a deal. So in a way, I do feel like if he was given a bit more time to express it, that would be fine. But if you follow the number of times he was asked the question across 2 days, it really wasn't clear. And when he said to reporters, I can't make this any clearer, well, at that point, you probably have fallen into the hole. And fascinating your interview with Jacob Spoonley, by the way, about the All Whites. Because I think, didn't the English have to play in the last World Cup? They played Iran and beat them heavily. And that was at a time of huge disruption and protest in Iran, and some of the players did sing the anthem, and they were clearly stressed. And I would be kind of surprised if they did turn up. But also FIFA, Gianni Infantino has absolutely wedded himself to Donald Trump, wearing Donald Trump's own merch, literally at meetings of that board of peace, so on and so on. So in that sense, I think that's part of that picture you were talking about, is that he has in Trump unilateral style, absolutely welded the governing body of the world's biggest sport to the Trump and MAGA project, and giving him that FIFA Peace Prize now is not going to be something that looks good in the hindsight of history, is
annals of history, yeah. All right, 5 minutes at the end, Colin, to talk about a big local media story and these claims of possible editorial interference at TVNZ.
Yeah, so quite surprising in a way, but if you followed it, probably best to start with TVNZ in that awkward position of having to report on itself on its own 6 p.m. bulletin tonight. So let's have a listen to the start of that.
The Broadcasting Minister confirmed TVNZ's board chair discussed a One News story with him over the weekend, a story the government wasn't happy with. Simon Mercet reports.
Last week, One News ran a story on crime, which looked at rising gang numbers. The government didn't like the story. It wanted more coverage on lower crime statistics. And it complained to the One News reporter.
I raised the issue with the journalists, as is perfectly appropriate.
The Broadcasting Minister now says that in a telephone conversation at the weekend, TVNZ board chair Andrew Barclay raised the issue of that One News report.
Colin, you're going to have to go back in time a little bit, please.
Yeah, just a little bit. So Thursday, as Simon Mercep said, he wasn't actually on a Harley-Davidson motorcycle there. That was just a vision of gang people on motorbikes. So Benedict Collins, TVNZ political reporter, reported on the official number of gang numbers ticking over the number of police officers. And as this is something that Luxon had previously said in the election campaign, he kind of pledged that this wouldn't happen. That was, I guess, the frame of the story. So whether it was a coincidence or not, the same day there were the latest crime figures down showing that violent crimes and the number of victims of them had fallen by tens of thousands. So if you're a government minister, if you're Justice Minister Paul Goldsmith or Police Minister Mark Mitchell, you'd be thinking tonight might be a good news night on the TV 6 p.m. news. Mark Mitchell then said it was to not have the good news reported was absolutely unbelievable. He went on ZB and said it, and then revealed he'd had a call from TVNZ from someone senior to apologise. And then fast forward to last night, TVNZ did a good news story by Benedict Collins, the same reporter, reporting those figures that they hadn't reported the previous week. So Newsroom's Tim Murphy wrote a big story about this, saying there's concern about TVNZ about how this came about, not being specific about it. And then he was dropped in this line saying, if there's evidence that the directors who are across this decision are involved in encouraging a second report to calm the government, and these are his words, the company, TVNZ, can be assured of another round of political attention from opposition parties. So Labour's Jenny Anderson asked Mark Mitchell about it, the police minister, in the House today. He said he hadn't been in contact with anyone from the TVNZ board, so this question was out there. But then Paul Goldsmith, Justice Minister, did tell reporters on the tiles in Parliament that he had had a conversation with the TVNZ board chair, but he said he didn't raise it. The chair rang him about other matters, and this came up and he shut down the discussion on it, so he said.
Is that contact with the chair irregular for a media company?
Well, they do meet. And I mean, just last night there was an event which I was actually at, which was a country calendar celebration, and I could have thrown
so you're in on it, Colin?
No, I'm not, but I could have thrown my grimy, wet Kathmandu raincoat over the CEO of TVNZ, the broadcasting minister, and the board chair. They were all. I wouldn't do that. That would be weird. So they will meet at events like that. But for the timing of this, I mean, it's weird, isn't it? So you have the item that annoys the government on a Thursday, a phone call in the weekend of passing matters. So I think, and then the corrective piece, which TVNZ insists in a statement, is its own work, its own decision to run that. But I think the timing of the call needs more explanation, like why did Andrew Barclay, the chair, decide he had to call, so soon after that offending report going out, or the one that annoyed the government. And look, previously, TVNZ has defended its journalists from this because the story was not incorrect or wrong. If an official complaint was made about it, I don't think it would be held as inaccurate not to have mentioned the good news figures. And I think previously, in 2024, TVNZ defended political attacks from David Seymour criticising Benedict Collins, the same reporter, for including critics of him in reporting about health. And they said, we're not asking for special treatment. We just want our reporters to be able to do their work without this pressure. And I don't quite know why they haven't responded in the same way with this one.